This meeting to order. Monday, November 8th, 2021, the Redistricting Advisory Committee of Half Moon Bay. I'm Committee Chair Holt. Is Paul Gator in attendance?
Present.
All right. Hal Bogner?
Present.
Steve Mallor?
Present.
Claudia Marshall? Okay. Phil Marshall?
Present.
And Michael Settles?
Present.
Okay, thanks everyone. I think we have a new representative with us this evening from NDC. We have Ken Chalkins. And so I'll go ahead and turn things over to Ken.
Well, greetings everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm new. Shalise had a significant family emergency that she had to tend to since it's sort of multiple things happen at the same time. So we're covering a little bit at this point with a lot of things going on around this issue. I'm hoping I'll be here, and if going forward it makes sense for me to continue, I will. I'm a little worried about that bird over your shoulder, Commissioner Maldonado. It kind of looks like it's looking at me saying, you're not from around these parts, are you? I'll do my best. So I'm down here in Southern California, in Pasadena, and I know where and have been to Half Moon Bay. My purpose at this point is to catch everybody up as to where we are in the process. Identify a couple of things that have happened significantly. The numbers that we had originally projected for Half Moon Bay actually went down. So we're dealing with a smaller number of folks in the city. The maps, we got a good handful of maps that were submitted. Unfortunately, none of them were what we call population balanced. I will show them to you. I don't have the specific numbers on me. I know Doug Johnson, who's the president of the company, did all this. He has those numbers, but I said, Doug, are they even close? And he said, no. So let me, and then I have 4 different maps, 2 for 4 council members and 2 for 5 council members that you can look at, that we put together. More importantly, we want to try and pull out as much as we can for what you think is the communities of interest that we either are missing or not missing, or that we need to emphasize. So with that intro, what I want to do is go to share my screen. Unless you have any preliminary questions, I can share my screen and go right to it.
Ken?
Yes.
We also have on the agenda a presentation of the survey results. I don't know if they'd be more appropriate before we see the maps or after.
I don't have anything more definitive on the survey results.
I have them. I have a PowerPoint that I can share.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think. If you think you can bind, I mean, I don't know, how do you expect it to have a conversation around the survey results, or just to show them?
Just to present them so that the committee can consider them as they go through the maps.
At the pleasure of the committee. I see a lot of heads nodding. You want to start with that? Okay.
Okay.
It'll give me a chance to take some notes. Thank you.
Share my screen. Okay, so as you all know, over the past about month and a half, 2 months, we've been doing a public outreach campaign to try and get as much public input from the community as we could while the committee was on a short break. We sent out direct mail surveys to the community, and we also tabled at a few different events and locations. We went to the library, we went to Our Lady of the Pillar Mass services, we went to an All Us event, we did Make It Main Street, we did the farmers market, and we've also done a lot of outreach on our social media and e-newsletters channels. So we did receive about 300 survey responses. And there were the 2 separate questions. One was which district model the community preferred. And then the second was asking people to define their communities of interest. And on the district model, these were the results. 51% preferred 4 districts with a 2-year elected mayor. 31% preferred 5 districts with an annual rotating mayor, which is similar to the model that we have for the mayor currently. And then 18% preferred 4 districts with a 4-year mayor. And then when it came to communities of interest, there were quite a few different comments, and I have a few slides that show the different comments, but there were a lot for Ocean Colony, a lot for Kenyatta Cove. A few people mentioned downtown. You see one up here for Arleta Park and Alsace-Lorraine. And then I don't know how fast you guys want me to go through these. There are, I believe, 3 of these slides. Let's see, Frenchman's Creek, Ocean Colony again, Kenyatta Cove, downtown, Cypress Cove. And then a few people said the entire, coastside community. And we did get some comments from people who, disagree with districting as a whole, which, we also received in 2018 when we transitioned. So those are expected. This one, downtown HMB from the Fire Station South, and a few others. And then I think this is the last one, Ocean Colony, the Kehoe community, one for Miramar there, downtown, another 2 more for Alsace-Lorraine. And we did get 2 El Granada communities of interest, which is outside of city limits. So we can't consider anything there. And one more, okay. Arleta Park, Town Center residents. Town Center is a section of our local coastal plan. So, and part of the Measure D map. So Town Center is kind of the downtown area and a little bit more around that. Kehoe, west of 1, south of 92, people north of 92, downtown. Let's see. Yeah, and that is it, but I wanted to make sure that you all had that information. And if you want me to go back to any slides, I'm happy to, or if you have any questions, happy to answer those. I see committee member Marshall has joined us. So hi, Claudia, nice to see you. Let me know if there were any questions on that or any discussion any of you wanted to have. And if not, I'll turn it back over to Ken and we can start looking through some maps. Steve?
Yes, thank you for presenting that. My question is on a couple of topics. One is, do we have any sense of, what it looks like you did is what you presented was weighted strictly across the board in terms of what everyone's responses were, but not any indication of the numbers of people in each category, if it could be broken down, because it looks like there was a lot of kind of disparate responses that were, people had a lot to say, which, of course makes that difficult. But that's one thing. And another question that I have for Ken, actually, before we get started on his piece, but also for you, Jessica, was that it sounds like we've got some sort of news updates on all of this. And I sort of expected that we might get some of that information as we've been on hiatus or whatever you want to call it here in terms of sort of redoing the maps. And I don't recall getting any communication to that effect in terms of, what these numbers are, which clearly, obviously has impacted the efficacy of whatever maps had been submitted and whether or not the tools have been updated with all the latest data. So those are my questions.
Thanks, Steve. To your first question, the slides that were comments only, those were comments taken from individual survey cards. The majority of people answered the first question about which model they prefer, but did not provide anything in the second question. So we took out any comments that, why are we doing this? I don't want to be in districts. We took any of those out and we put all comments that referred to a specific community of interest on those slides. So each of those are a singular answer from a single respondent.
Okay, so in that case, what you're saying is you had about 300 respondents to the first question, but only those, what looks like maybe 50 or 60 or so, if I'm guessing, responses to the
Yeah, about that. And like I said, there were also a lot of comments of, let's just go back to normal. We don't want districts. There were probably equal as many of those comments as there were community of interest comments. So
what I always refer to as the horse and buggy response.
Yeah.
Why can't we go back to horse and buggy, et cetera?
Yeah. And then on your second question, we got the final numbers a few weeks ago. We did a presentation to the city council at our last week's council meeting, and District R was updated with those numbers, but it was pretty much right near the deadline for when maps were due. And so it did make it difficult for the people who were drawing maps during the map drawing period. The ACS, the American Community Survey, is what had us estimated at about 12,800. And the final census numbers that came in were, I think, 11,72824, something like that. And so you figure it's probably really somewhere in the middle of that, but we do have to go off of the official census numbers. And that's, given the timing of when those came in and when maps were due, kind of leads to. Now, I will mention, though, that I know NDC took into account the communities that were marked on the publicly drawn maps. They took those into account when drawing theirs. And so they weren't for naught. The exact lines weren't exactly where they need to be.
That's right.
So does it make sense for us, or is it even within our purview to extend the deadline for maps at this point? Or is there a legal reason that we can't do that? Because it seems to me at this point that represents my back of the envelope calculation here, close to a 10% reduction in our population based on what we originally thought. And one would only imagine that has, probably even deeper impacts on different demographics and what have you, which might answer why none of the maps fit the population models.
Yeah, I agree.
You want me to answer, Ken? I believe it's the timing issue.
Sorry, you're on the right numbers. I know Doug, when he did the maps, tried to incorporate exactly the thing you're talking about, the reduction plus the feedback. The answer to the question about whether you can extend it, you can. The real advantage that you all have is that you're not trying to get this done by December 15th, which some cities are. We had compression on the front end, and COVID has impacted everything. And so, it's sort of not a throwaway line, it literally has. We got the final data well into October. And so everybody was running around scrambling. You did take a hit as far as the numbers, but generally speaking, the idea here is to now look at the maps that we have and try and shape a little bit based on the feedback in the survey and continue to narrow down. And you do have time. You could extend the input that people have on the maps, or extend the time that you have to deliberate, because you're not trying to get it done by December 15th. So, but you'll see in the maps there's well, when we get there we'll talk about it. But I think you're going to see your city council currently, the districts currently, are pretty close to what's called population balanced. And so there's the option of also leaving as is or changing depending on what you get from the community.
Who has seen these maps that sound like they've been drawn by NDC? Who has seen these maps at this point?
Nobody. We took, Jessica's exactly right. We took the feedback. We took the maps as it was. We took the 4 and the 5, which is unique. Not most jurisdictions don't have sort of the options. And we went to work to try and, try and figure out maps that made sense. You have an ocean on the left. And so that sort of dictates certain things. There's certain pieces about Half Moon Bay that dictate or restrict or put boundaries on it. But based on what we took in, we drew some maps, 2 for the 4 district and 2 for the 5. And let's see what we have. You know, you can take a look at it and then give me full feedback as much as you can, and we'll go back to work and produce more and or take more from the community. It really is, I mean, it really is an iterative process.
I'd like to, before we delve into the map side of things, ask a question or two on the survey side, if that would be okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm very interested. You know, you made the remark that you know, half the respondents roughly said, you know, why don't we go back to the at large for all the council members? And I would like to see the total breakdown of all of the responses, whether they're relevant or not, to get a sense of the community, because I think that's meaningful. And I don't know if those can be tabulated, or if it might be possible for committee members variously to, leaf through the 300 or so responses, you know, and kind of pass them around over the next, month or so between meetings. But I would find that very interesting. And you know, it's, I don't know what can be done with that information, but, you know, it definitely, you know, we haven't had hardly any attendees from the public at these meetings. And, you know, that sounds to me like, you know, it's feedback from the community that should be taken into account, and maybe it influences some of the choices that the city council will eventually make.
I have an Excel spreadsheet with all the raw data that I'd be happy to share with the committee.
Thank you.
I think I saw Claudia. Did you have something before we move on to taking a look at the maps?
Yes, I'm sorry I joined the meeting a little bit late. Was there a breakdown between the public input in terms of the 4 districts versus 5 districts and their responses?
Yeah, I can share that again. It was 51% preferred a 2-year mayor with 4 districts, 31% 5 districts with a rotating mayor, and 18% 4 districts with a 4-year elected mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Committee member Gator.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Thanks for showing us the data, Jessica. I was trying to scribble down all those communities, and it seemed like to me we got all the communities that I would have expected to have seen. And in this kind of a survey, I didn't see anything missing. We had Alsace-Lorraine, Arleta Park, Ocean Colony, and so on and so forth. But I'm just curious if any other committee members thought there was a community there that was missing in terms of where people live. And then what I found maybe a little bit surprising was the only community of people that was in there were seniors, unless I missed some other comments, which is perhaps a little bit surprising, because we talked quite a lot about in some of our earlier meetings about communities of people with similar interests or challenges, not necessarily based on where they live. So I'm a little bit surprised that didn't come out in the survey. Nothing we can do about it. It's just an observation on the data. And I agree with Hal. I'd like to see a bit more of the raw data as well.
I guess I had a follow-up on that. When you were, collecting the survey responses, what fraction of the 300 would you say were from the Latino community?
They're anonymous surveys. So, yeah, we didn't receive any in Spanish, but they're anonymous nonetheless. So I wouldn't know who or where they came from the residents they were sent to.
Yeah.
Okay, do any committee members have more questions? And maybe then we can take a look at the maps and perhaps discuss after we take a look at that, extending our period right now, because I think our next meeting is in the middle of December, and it seems like we might be able to kind of extend the map period, since now we have, you know, different data loaded into the maps, and maybe we might get a few more submissions that would be more accurate.
Real quick on that, Chair Holt, what I would suggest is our next meeting, the December 16th meeting, is the meeting at which you all are supposed to select the 2 maps that you forward to the council, and then the council gets them January 19th. I would look at the maps tonight, and then if the committee wishes, I could contact those who did submit a map and ask them to go back in and redraw their maps with the population, and then we could present those on the 16th to you all as well.
That seems like a good idea. Does everyone else agree with that idea of reaching out to people who submitted maps? And Jessica, just to clarify on that, would somebody know, based on when they turned in the map, whether it had the old data or the new data?
I would probably need NDC to let me know based on when it was submitted. The paper maps, I would assume, were the old data, but any that were submitted online, NDC would know based on which date they were submitted, whether it was the new data or old data. So we could reach out to those that we know submitted with the old data, and anyone who submitted a paper map.
And also sounds like all of the maps that were received also were not correctly balanced anyway. And so maybe sending them back to the original authors could also help rectify that.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
Yeah, so you said that none of the submitted maps from the community, and presumably that includes members of this board, none of them were population balanced. So does that mean that none of them were population balanced for the projected numbers, or none for the real numbers? And how many actual submissions does that represent? Were we talking about 5 maps, 50 maps, et cetera? So 2 different questions.
Sorry, you'll see them in a second. I think there are 6. And the answer is it's for the projected numbers. I mean, the numbers that are current, and I'll confirm that. And by the way, I should add, I asked Doug this. We had a long chat about this. If they were off but close, I would have argued to say, let's bring them as, you know, can we nip and tuck here? And he said they were quite a bit off. So he wasn't comfortable proposing them as a reasonable map as an alternative. That said, I think with Chair Holt's suggestion, with Jessica, what you suggested, we could certainly do. You could go and find those maps, get back to those folks, and we could try and include those, adjust them appropriately, and get them close to, if not population balanced, and include them on the 16th if you wanted.
I only speak for myself in this, and I would encourage anybody else who has anything to say on this topic to chime in, but I was holding off to do a map myself until I had confirmed that we had real data, because I had a hunch that the projected data was going to be quite far off, but never having heard that we had the data and / the tools updated to reflect that data, I didn't draw a map, and I just wonder whether others may be in a similar situation. And I would welcome the opportunity to essentially reboot that process. You know, we're not talking about days and weeks to create a map. It's, you know, sort of hunkered down with, you know, a paper and pencil and, you know, spend an hour or 2 or something like that. But like I said, I never sort of got that ping saying, okay, the data's in, the tools are updated, go for it. Here we are at this moment that says basically we only had a handful of maps submitted, and now we essentially are going to rely on NDC. You know, I don't believe any of whom actually live in our community to draw our districting maps, which I don't consider to be acceptable.
I agree, Steve. And I think that we can probably move to extend our period for submitting maps. It sounds like that's a possibility here. I'm also curious, is there any mapping tool, or is there maybe the tool's already built in where we can see the difference between the previous data and the current data that changed? Like, is there I know it showed a gradient before in purple, that showed population change. Will we be able to see those differences? Because I'm really curious, perhaps if there were specific pockets of the community where the census data changed significantly.
Why don't I go through the map? Why don't I go through the presentation? You can look at the maps. I think it's visually, you'll be able to see there are variations, and I'll stop and you can look and I'll try and zoom in as best I can. You'll see them, the differences. I mean, graphically there are differences, and then you can see the ones that we drew. I think it'll be easier.
Before we leap into that, you know, I also think that extending the amount of time that people can contribute might be a positive. You know, I would hope that the survey results indicate that more people are interested or becoming aware of the process than were initially, from the attendance we saw at the earlier meetings. And I was a little bit confused looking at the schedule. You know, today's November 8th meeting, you know, says review and revise draft maps, select focus maps. The December 16th meeting says the same thing. The January 8th meeting says solicit input on focus maps. And then January 19th, City Council public hearing begins the process at the council level. So, you know, perhaps if we extend the period, you know, maybe we need to add one more meeting later in the process for the committee, you know, to be able to make selections. But I like very much the idea of making sure the public and the committee has more time for input, and that we get more word out and more participants. And then secondly, there's still no 5-district mapping tool that gives feedback on the numbers and balance of 5 districts, is there? I thought that there was effort being made in that direction at NDC.
Well, I think what you can do is just draw 4 districts and then leave the 5th one blank, no color, and it'll still tally the numbers within that. It's just, you're just not actually drawing that 5th one, you're just leaving it empty.
And it'll show the splits of population balance.
It does.
Because I see there's a 5-district, you know, example with a white area at the top, and when I go over to the evaluation, it shows 1, 2, 3, 4, and overall. But you know, the numbers aren't. You know, the numbers for the 5th one aren't there, and I guess, you know, it's pencil work for us to figure that out then. But maybe, Ken, you can elucidate on that when you're starting to show us maps, and I'll stand back on that.
Now, there's just one thing I will mention. You're using District R, and there's a slide in the presentation. District R is, I think you're using District R, is that right?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
They are out of Tufts. It's an academic institution. And as the slide you'll see says, they're a victim of their own success. They were overwhelmed and slammed not only with the compression, and they have had one hell of a time getting response to us as the client, and then you as a client through us, et cetera. We have a new mapping tool. It's called Dave's Map, and apparently people are loving it. It's easy, et cetera. I would suggest that we move. I'll show you what we have, and that we get Dave's up and running so that it'll be easier for you all, and because we're having really a heck of a time with District R. And it's not, I mean, it's all in good faith. They're not, it's just they were overwhelmed, literally, so.
And then Chair Holt, if I could make a quick note on the schedule. So we have this meeting tonight. The next meeting is, tonight's focus was to pick 3 to 5 focus maps. And then December 16th is to select the 2 focus maps that are then going to the council on January 19th. There is no meeting on January 8th. Hal, I think you might be looking at an old schedule.
And it's the schedule posted on the website.
That's the one I'm looking at as well. and it goes from December 16th to January 19th.
I'm looking at drawhmb.org/schedule, and it shows December 16th, then January 8th, 11 a.m., and then it shows January 19th.
Okay, I'll have to have NDC update that website. I'm looking at the city's website. The January 19th council meeting is when the council will then talk about those 2 to 3 focus maps and then provide any comments back to the committee. And then we have 2 committee meetings, a Saturday meeting, and then a Thursday, I believe it's a Thursday evening meeting to receive public input and discuss those maps again following the council's input. And then on February 15th, the city council selects the final map and then adopts it March 15th.
Does the committee have the freedom to consider adding another meeting for ourselves in that schedule?
We could, but I know it would also depend on when NDC is available. So it would probably take a little bit of work, but if the committee felt that they needed another meeting before the council's January 19th meeting, that's something we could certainly look at.
Thank you.
And all I can say is we will make every effort to, sorry to jump in, Commissioner, to accommodate the schedule.
So maybe we could tuck in a meeting before the December 16th and just set a new deadlines for ourselves in checking out the mapping, the new mapping tools, the new numbers, perhaps get a chance to submit our own maps within that time period. And I don't know, let's say first week of December, tuck in a meeting, and then we could stick to the schedule from there on out. Because it seems like the meetings after the December 16th map involve coordinating with other bodies such as the city council and public meetings and such.
Question, do you hear me? Okay, yes. Thank you. First of all, I agree with Phil from the standpoint I'm concerned not knowing what the representation is. And if we're going to start using another tool, my concern is at what point in time is the community going to be oriented to what that tool is? So I think the idea of extending the time is a good idea, but people need to be prepared to use, if there's a change in equipment, based on a good reason, they need to also have an orientation as to how to use that equipment.
There's Member Settle, sorry, there's a really good link that's a tutorial with the new tool. I agree with your assessment. And Dave's, apparent, by all accounts, is really easy, and there's a tutorial that goes with it. So,
okay.
So.
Well, I'm interested to see what the maps are.
Let's do it. Are we ready to see some maps?
I see Commissioner Marshall's hand. I don't know if that's still there or not. I'm looking at the screen.
Just really quick, I want us to be clear about this. So the December 6th meeting, is that the one where we down selected 2 maps? And on the 19th, the January 19th meeting, is that when the city council will discuss 2 maps from us or 3 to 5 maps from us?
So the original, what the schedule says is that today's meeting is we're looking at first drafts of committee maps, selecting 3 to 5 focus maps. And then our next meeting on December 16th, we are supposed to select 2 to 3 focus maps. Then the 19th of January is the council meeting with public hearing, review focus maps, and provide revisions.
Okay, so when do we make our final recommendation of 2 maps, which is our charge?
That would be the January 27th meeting, and then the council would do their final map selection on February 15th.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Share my screen. As it turns out, I was looking at the schedule at the same time, so. Okay. So that's that. I happen to have been looking. I think this is the one that Commissioner Barger was looking at. And you're saying, Jessica, this is off because that January 8th is no longer there?
Yeah, I don't believe it's supposed to be, no. Okay. But I'll double check.
Mr. Bonder, that's what you were looking at, right?
Was that intended to be a public meeting for public input prior to it going to the council?
Well, we replaced it with the January 22nd. So I'm assuming that it was just left here inadvertently.
That's up to you all. We'll wait to hear from you, Jessica, but it's up to you about when you want to meet, how you want to meet, and what you want to gather input around. You just let us know. Okay?
Okay. All
right. It's important for all of our meetings that we go through this slide and review. How do I get you guys? Let's see. There, sorry about that. The part about population balance is captured in the federal law on the left. The equal population law is literally, you've heard it before, one person, one vote. It is done in jurisdictions all around the United States every 10 years. You basically take the size of the jurisdiction and you divide it by the council or the districts, and that is the target. And what we use to try and, it's hard to get it perfect, but we basically say you're going to try and get within 10% total. So you can't be one district can't be 5.5 below and another can't be 5.5 above. You can have some that are 5.5 below, but then you can't have anything else that's 5 below above, if that makes sense. Populations have to be equal. And so that's with the population shifts, that's one of the, it usually is the thing that we do at the back end when we try and take into account a whole bunch of other communities of interest, et cetera. The Federal Voting Rights Act and no racial gerrymandering has to do with what are called protected classes, ethnic and linguistic groups that are called out, and you can't dilute the potential for a political or for power to be exerted in a representative body. You can't guarantee anything, but you cannot dilute it. It's important to note out there are two kind of significant ways that for dilution. First, if you have enough people in one particular area where they should have one particular seat or they have the potential to get a seat, you can't carve off a piece, thereby reducing that number and diluting significantly the potential for that community to speak through elected representative. That's called cracking. But similarly, if you have enough people to, by the numbers, to have 2 seats or 2 potential seats, you also can't draw a line that goes through, carves off, and puts most everybody into one. That's called packing. And it's a subtle but really important difference, and it's important to note. And you'll see it came out a little bit through a comment. What's important is you're not allowed, even though you can't dilute political potential, you are not allowed to racially gerrymander. You're not allowed to then go draw a district that is specific to capture a racial or linguistic group. So what ends up happening is people use shorthand and they start to do stuff and you move quickly and we start talking about a this seat or a that seat. And instead you have to talk about communities of interest, which gets us to the middle column. For cities that are redistricting, the most critical part are those 4 pieces. The first is they have to be geographically contiguous. Now that could look unusual. It could look like a thin band, et cetera, because you have to get from one place to another, but they have to be connected. The second is communities of interest. You've heard that. If you ask most people, they'll say communities are a physical or a geography, but in fact, communities can be defined all sorts of ways, socioeconomic. You can do, someone mentioned earlier, seniors. I usually have people thinking to themselves to focus on the territory and not the map. Don't worry about the streets and the lines and all that stuff yet. But think about, where do you shop? Where do you play? Where do you do what you do? And where are there groups of people that seem to be in a similar space? The third is easily identified boundaries. And that could be both man-made or natural. You do have the ocean, but you have freeways. You could have a park. You could have a shopping center. You could have all kinds of things where people literally say, we don't go over there. Or no, that freeway doesn't divide us. We do go on both sides of it. But it's up for you all to decide where, or your community to decide where those identifiable boundaries are. And then compactness is something that we try and look at to make sure that people are not looking to quote unquote gerrymander. That's what the courts will look at and see if there's a lack of compactness in order to gather populations. The other last column there is you want to, when it says minimize voters shifted to different election years, if your members of your city council were elected for a 4-year term and by drawing a map, you're going to get them rotated in and they're only going to be elected and they'll have to run for re-election in 2 years. You try and avoid that because it's sort of the will of the people. You want that to speak. And if you're elected for 4, you should stay for 4. Similarly, the last one, you want to respect voters' choices for the continuity in office. The other thing is if there is some growth that you could identify with a logic, if you go to the city planning office and they have permits pulled and you know where there's going to be a big development, you can consider that in your logic. You have to really have a good underpinning for it and data. And so you can quote unquote underpopulate a district and because within the next 10 years it's going to grow. And then there is a yield. People can say, look, why change something that's working? And so you're trying to, you want to start from do the district's work. And then similarly, are there spaces, you're not big enough, but if you are a county, you're trying to keep cities and other places identifiable, if at all possible, within certain districts, if that makes sense. Okay. Any question there? And you can see at the bottom, most people put that term gerrymandering towards political gerrymandering because it started that way a couple of 100 years ago. And so as per California, you're not allowed to favor a political party. These are the current districts. We tried to put the whole district and then down where the downtown or in the center where all the districts come together. This is the current 4 districts. I don't know if there's any questions here or comments.
I have a quick question, actually.
Yes.
Just regarding the continuity in office, do we have current council members placed on any of our maps that we're looking at, like District R or any of those tools?
They're not placed on there. We know where they are. And we will incorporate that into our map drawing after all of the other stuff is put together. Okay. It's one of those things where you're trying to protect against, again, unnecessary disrupting of that situation.
Mm-hmm. For the benefit of us on the committee who are, always trying to imagine, I think, next steps as we take in this information, it seems to me that we had 2 council members elected by district who would be at the 2-year mark, and the other 3 council members are at the 4-year mark in the next election. So if you could, at the earliest opportunity, point out the locations of the 2 who are in the middle of their terms when the next election occurs, because it sounds from what you said that the priority is to not put them in the same district without there being a very strong reason to.
Yeah. I won't have that tonight, but I'm going to take a note. I will make sure that happens. And by the way, Madam Chair, the tools don't put people electeds where it's not part of the tool, but it's something that we ask the city for up front, so we know where things are. And Commissioner Bogner, we can certainly find that out. And once you get to the point where you accept your maps, the next iteration is to accept, how you're going to rotate different election cycles in, right?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is election sequencing.
Yes.
And when the council chooses the final map, they'll also determine election sequencing. And given that our elections are, 2 council members, 1 election, 3 council members, the next election, depending on the model that is chosen, they'll figure out an election sequencing that works to where any current council members are still working out their term.
Right, that's where it's usually done.
There's no mystery here. I mean, one of them lives, you know, in the area behind Three Amigos, and the other lives, I think, in a canyon east of the downtown area. Is that correct? The 2 who were elected in 2020? I mean, we can just know it and take it into account now.
District 2, and Joaquin Jimenez is District 3. So presumably the 2022 election using this map would have been given our current district model that we adopted in 2018. The 2022 election would have been District 1, District 4, and a 4-year elected mayor.
If you could kindly show us, you know, exactly, you know, the spots on the map where the 2 elected council members whose terms, you know, shouldn't be interrupted are. Then, you know, when we look at, you know, adjusting lines, we can avoid accidentally pushing them into the same district.
Or are you wanting to do that now?
Well, we might as well have the information.
I don't, but Jessica, if you want to direct my cursor, I can point to it if you want.
I mean, I think we should look at all the maps first, and we should look at them in the sense of communities of interest, and then we can look at how current council members fit. Like I mentioned, though, Harvey's in District 2 and Joaquin is in District 3.
But just tell us, you know, along what streets they are, and then we'll just know, and it won't come up again. It shouldn't be a mystery. We could all look them up separately if we chose. It'd be helpful here. It will keep my focus on the meeting.
Main Street, I believe, and I forget the name of the street that Harvey lives on. I think it's Cypress, but I'm not for certain.
You tell me when you're ready.
Actually, it's Pine. Jessica, it's Pine, not Cypress.
Right, so he's there in that bottom right corner of District 2. And whereabouts would Joaquin be? Would he be east of Main Street or west of it, or?
Like South Main Street.
Yes, but is he in what's now District 1 or District 3?
No, District 3. He's the current District 3 council member.
And if we change the lines of District 1 and 3, where do we need to keep we just have to not broach the line between 3 and 2 right now, between them. Thank you.
Do we even have a requirement that city council members actually reside in the districts they represent?
No, and we should go through the maps and look at what makes sense based on the communities, and then we can come back to this.
There's really no requirement for that? That just seems extremely surprising. I would never have guessed that.
And I would agree with you, Jessica. We're doing this a little bit backwards, because you want to be careful of this conversation so it doesn't look like we're trying to keep people in districts. The first order of business is population balance, and then communities of interest, et cetera.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move through the maps then. Okay. Thank you.
Your current districts, and this is, again, dropped. Jessica had it almost spot on. You were 10 off. It's pretty good memory. But you went from 12,730 to 11,814. And so your target for 4 districts is 2,954. Your target for 5 districts is 2,363. But you can see here the deviation is off. You have significantly more people in 4 and 4 and 1, and significantly less people in 2 and 3. Okay.
And the deviation limit is 5% or 10%?
Is 10 total. 10 total. Right. So this is stretching it. If this District 4 wasn't here, -6 and +3, you're at 9. It's stretching it. You should probably try and get closer. But because of this, 9 is almost tilt at 10 by itself.
So you're adding up. You're adding up the absolute values of the deviation?
Correct.
Thank you.
This is, sorry, I'm going to have to move this here. This is the thing Doug said he wanted to show this. We did get a submission that said we want an area with high Hispanic numbers. When you start to get to that language, it's difficult. We are not drawing ethnic seats. The way the language is you're trying to make sure that the protected class, ethnic and or linguistic, is not the predominant factor of a district. Instead, you're looking at communities of interest, and you're trying to avoid racial gerrymandering. But it's tough when we get it, and I get it happens all the time. People speak shorthand. For the commission and the council, you need to be extremely careful with what you're doing publicly so that when you do present maps, that they have the undergirding and the logic that you can defend as a committee. So I don't know how I'm going to get this out of here. Oh, there we go. How's that? So I was wrong. There are 8. There are 4 here, and there are 4 coming. That these are maps that were significantly different. They were not close to population balanced. I can leave them here. I can zoom in as best I can, but they are off, significantly off. I wish I knew exactly where they were off. I asked Doug about it. He just said it would, if we tried to balance them, it would change the map significantly. So the one thing I can comment on is if you look at this map, almost all of the other maps do your coastline into 2. This map here drew it into 1. And I suspect that might be part of the issue that changes a lot of the other ones into an overage. Here you can see there's a significant concentration in this space here. Again, I don't know specifically, but I know these are off. Madam Chair or Jessica, you all tell me what you want to do here, or I can keep going. Sorry, that's the one we were looking at before. This is the next one. So there are 7.
Chair Holt, my recommendation would be just to take a look at what these 7 submissions thought were communities of interest and use that when you all then go through the maps that are population balanced. And
we do that by just seeing how they were grouped, or
right. Like, for example, you can see a little bit of a pattern with a small pattern with the downtown area, but most especially also Kenyatta Cove and Ocean Colony. But even on these 4, you see the way North Half Moon Bay is split. You have 2 going the opposite way, and then the other 2 going the opposite way.
Is there a way to see these though with the numbers balanced ultimately once they've gone back to the authors and they've been corrected? Will we be able to see the maps that?
Well, I'll ask them to, redo them with the correct numbers and make them population balanced, but they won't look like this.
Right.
Because these areas split up this way are not population balanced.
Right.
That's the key. That's
you can
exactly
see
right,
this
Jessica.
third one. It's including Kenyatta Cove and Ocean Colony, but then goes up to what looks like Kelly. I mean, that's a good portion. I mean, that's a much higher population than, for example, the blue section. So the map submitters can redraw their maps, but they won't look like this.
Right.
So that's why I mentioned if you just kind of look at what communities of interest were included to give you an idea of what the intent was of the maps.
Okay, so should we maybe just discuss what we think the intent is with some of these maps, and we could bullet point for ourselves what we think people are interested in doing and creating these, and then once we come back and see the actual corrected maps, we'll still keep those things in mind.
Well, and you can also utilize those points when NDC shows the maps that are population balanced. And once you see what those communities are.
If I might, so you're trying to take, you did the survey, you're trying to divine from this, which I think, again, you would have a better idea of what folks were trying to get at, and then you'll see our maps. All of that would be infinitely helpful for us as we make the next iteration to try and get you to maps that represent that. So it's sort of a mishmash, but I think if you could divine from these maps here and get clear, but you also have that survey. There was a lot going on there. If I were to ask you what are the 5, 6 handful of most poignant ones and see if we've captured them in the balanced ones, or if we haven't, where haven't we? That would move us far ahead.
One other thing too, all 4 of these, I believe that's Frenchman's Creek there. All 4 of these have the area north of that as one district. So like that's something you could glean from these 4 maps. Right, so Kenyatta.
Are you talking about this area
together? Yeah. And then that northern area together, all 4 of the people that drew these maps considered those communities of interest that should be kept together.
So if I may, you know, it looks to me like these are available on the districtr.org, you know, set of maps that we can look at and examine more closely on our own if we'd like. Is that correct?
Yes.
And my personal, you know, desire would be to, you know, take these as sort of showing how some people conceptualized, you know, slicing and grouping things, you know, just conceptually at a high level, and you know, want to move on to you know, become trained in the Dave's mapping tool, which it sounds like we're going to be moving on to being able to utilize shortly, and it'll have the current census data, so we'll actually be able to you know, do you know, productive efforts to group things, and whether they look like this or whether we can make ones that look like these or differently, I don't know yet. But that seems to me like that might be going forward a very good you know, thing to proceed to, rather than delve into, you know, 4 people's, you know, concepts here that I think we can pretty much grok.
Yeah, Hal, I agree with you. I think these maps, just from having played with the tool myself, I can see that these are going to have to significantly change in order to balance. So it might not be even worth our time looking at these, except for what Jessica's saying, where we need to see what people's intent is. And so maybe we can each on our own go into the tool and look at what people submitted and make a list for ourselves of the intentions we think are the communities of interest that we see formed in each of these maps before we go in and play with the tool, like you're saying, Hal, before we go in and start drawing our own submissions with the updated numbers on the next mapping tool.
I would also ask if, you know, week by week, more tools or more data becomes available to the members of the committee. If, you know, we could just receive notifications as to what's becoming available or what's expected to become available next, so that we can kind of make use of the time between meetings well. Because it sounds like not everything is there today that's going to be there soon.
Jessica, when do you think you would be able to send out the updated information for the people who submitted maps?
We could work on that this week.
Could we set a new deadline for submitting maps with the updated information? So maybe like December 1st or something like that. And then the committee would know, as of December 1st, the maps that we're looking at are now balanced, accurate with the numbers, and we can delve in and take some time with those. And then we have between December 1st and December 16th, you know, 2 weeks or so for ourselves to really look through what's been submitted. Mm-hmm. Does that seem like a reasonable timeline for everybody? That would give us, I mean, today's November 8th. If Jessica were to reach out to folks, tell them to update the maps, we know that December 1st, they should all be updated. We took a look at them during that time between December 1st and December 16th. And then December 16th, we come in and we know that what we're looking at is accurate and updated.
So, Miranda, question for you. If we put a December 1st deadline in for updated maps, they obviously have to be reviewed to make sure that they're accurate in terms of the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And so what type of leeway does the public have, not the public, but the committee, in terms of getting reviewed and approved maps? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Are you asking between, if we were to update the deadline to the 1st of December, does that give enough time for the committee to review between that and December 16th?
No, the whoever is receiving these updated maps by the 1st of December, they obviously have to turn them around and give them a second review to make sure that they are accurate to the numbers, et cetera, before we get them. So there is a little
the tool do that?
No, it would be something that MDC would have to do. Thank you, Commissioner. That we'd have to do it. We'd need some time with everything else going on. I can, let me take this request back, and I know exactly what you're asking, Chair Holt. I hear it. So between the 1st and the 16th, we have to do what Commissioner Marshall is suggesting: get it, review it, and say of the 8 that we see, these 3 came back population balanced and with communities of interest. The other 5 are still off the chart, and now you've got 3 more to look at, et cetera. That's 15 days to do all that, right? Yeah, if I got that, we can work as quickly as we can, and I'll press internally. I'm just going to tell them that that's what you wanted, and then I can get back to Jessica to say how quickly we can turn that around. So you have time to consider things.
Okay, thank you.
If that makes sense.
Just as a follow-up, are we just getting the people that submitted these documents that are not accurate and we're not going to be able to use them? Are we just giving them a second bite of the apple? Or are we going back to the community and saying we are extending this deadline for anybody who didn't submit the first time around?
That's a good question. Are we able to open it up, to reopen it, Jessica?
Yeah, it's at the committee's discretion, honestly. So
I would suggest we do that.
I agree with you, Michael. Maybe we should reopen the process. And sorry, just thinking about what Ken is telling us in terms of the turnaround. What if we were to, it's the November 8th today, what if we were to say we have 2 more weeks? Submissions need to be in by the 22nd of November, and that would give perhaps a little bit more time for processing and review before we were then to meet on December 16th. So gives a little bit more time on the processing end and gives us a nice clean 2 weeks right now to reopen things to the public. What do you think of that?
I think that's a good option.
I would likely say the 26th. Our e-news goes out on Thursdays, and we could run it for 3 weeks basically, and then do some social media sprinkled throughout. And then that would give almost 3 weeks to NDC before the December 16th meeting to go through the maps.
Yeah, you just got to consider Thanksgiving is in the middle of that, not only for us, but for everybody. But you pick the dates, and we'll do as best we can to get what we need to give you guys as much time as possible, give your community as much time as possible to draw maps.
I think the 26th makes a lot of sense for that reason. It kind of splits the difference. We've got 3 weeks up front, deadline on the 26th, and then 3 more weeks for processing before the next meeting on the 16th. Is everyone feeling good about that timeline? Okay, good. I see a lot of thumbs up. So hopefully we can move forward with that, and just kind of keep in our own minds too that we want to be updating or submitting maps, updating maps that were already submitted, and then just start on that date on the 26th. We can expect to, maybe we can't go in at that point. Maybe we'll get a heads up from NDC when they've been processed, so we can start looking through the maps that have been submitted, so that when we come to the meeting on the 16th of December, we've had a chance to sort of start cataloging those things, those patterns we see in the maps and the communities of interest that seem to be popping up in repeated maps.
Yeah. And again, we will try and filter as best we can based on the feedback, and ones that are legit or hitting the mark and ones that aren't.
Yeah, those that you would see, Chair Holt, wouldn't necessarily be population balanced or
right.
We're just acceptable in some other format.
Right.
Does the committee want us to use Dave's maps that Ken suggested, or stay with District R?
It seems like Dave's maps offers a little bit more flexibility for us.
Sorry, I should say you can currently use District R. It's up, and to people that are comfortable with it, the numbers are already loaded. You can use that. We can give you Dave's as well, just for people that have an extra one. It's not something that, you can use both, is what I'm saying. And that'll help folks that if they're already comfortable with District R, we will still see District R, and we'll be able to look at it and see if it's balanced or not. So
does Dave's map, would they have the 4 or 5 district option?
Yeah. Yes.
So that's something that'll also need to be added to the website, I believe, because I haven't seen it as an option yet. So Jessica, do you have an idea of when that might be able to be available for us to start using? Or
I'll work with Ken offline and we'll get it up there. The city has to pay for whatever map service that we choose, and we chose District R at the beginning of the process, and so that's what's up there. So I'll work with Ken to figure out, how we get Dave's maps up there as an option, and clear all that up before we start sending out our communications about the new deadline.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you. And Ken, are there any 5 district map submissions?
There you go. Right on cue. Similarly, we're not population balanced. And to Jessica's point earlier, you're still seeing, you're seeing in this one that north part, except for, and then these you can certainly see the coast is split up multiple ways, right? And I don't know what would be useful at this point for you. And my apologies if we couldn't get it even closer with demographics, but it's just they're way off. But we wanted to be able to show that we looked at them, we considered it, et cetera. But I'll tell you what, can we just go through and you can see the ones that we put together and then we can sort of look at it as a whole? Or do you want me to stop here and you want to look at these? It's up to you, Chair.
I think we can move on and see what you've put together since these are going to be changing so significantly.
Can I just ask one question before we go forward? With map submissions, is there an option for any sort of narrative defense of a person's submissions, which is to say, my map is based on these assumptions, or is that sort of run counter to the objectives? Because it would seem as though one of the things that would be valuable would be to, and I believe, Jessica, you mentioned this earlier, would be to understand what were these people trying to accomplish with their map. And whether or not they successfully did it, it may still be interesting to take into account what were they attempting to do, and yeah.
I mentioned two things. First, that would be very valuable for us since it's there. That gets to communities of interest. The other thing is I'm just reminded of something. I have to check with you, Jessica, to make sure that District R actually is loaded with the new data. So that may be one of the issues that we have to work out as far as District R, Dave's, et cetera. So I'll work it out. But it's a very, very good question. But you're right. If we could understand through some narrative, but we don't unless they submit it. But when you reach out to these folks, you could presumably ask them to submit and add a narrative that tells them what they were trying to accomplish.
I'm curious about that too. And it looks like here, like the two middle maps are actually very, like almost the same map.
Yes,
just different colors.
Actually, before we move on, I think I'd like to spend a bit more time discussing these community maps, sort of in the spirit of Hal's comment earlier about, we had so little public input, we should make the most of what we got. I have a few comments on the things we're seeing in the 4-district map set. But you can also see it in the 5 districts. So one thing I found was that it's actually quite difficult to draw maps that keep north of town together, just because there are 2 census blocks either side of Highway 1 that are very large. And that really limits the drawing of the maps, I think. So my question for Ken was going to be, is it possible to divide a census block in order to sort of free up the puzzle pieces?
It's not something preferable, but yes, it's possible.
So you'll see.
I thought we were told that it was not possible by Shalise.
Okay, I'm going to check. Let me check with Shalise because I can ask her or Doug. I know that it's doable, but I know it's not something that we would prefer to do.
I hear what you're saying.
Sorry.
That block we're looking at, like in the middle map right there, the blue block is basically one big census tract, and you can't split it when you're trying to draw the map, and so it just invariably becomes its own block.
Yeah, and the same for the one on the other side of the highway.
Yeah.
If it's difficult to do if it's heavily populated.
If I may add on Phil's point about the census block question. There are neighborhoods where, the interiors of the neighborhoods are their own census blocks, and the external edges of the neighborhoods, such as Terrace Avenue, are part of a much larger area that wraps around like the external parts of the Spindrift neighborhoods and things like that, where, you can't naturally draw Spindrift separate from Terrace Avenue, for example. If you could break the census blocks, then it would seem to me we'd have a lot more flexibility for treating neighborhoods as neighborhoods truly, and being able to push lines between any 2 neighborhoods if that would be helpful. I know that it must open a huge can of worms for you, Ken, if just even these thoughts.
Yeah, I can tell you, you can draw lines in lots of different ways around neighborhoods in all sorts of ways. Again, I'll state it. You can, if there's not a lot of population, it's easier to split it, but we're trying to avoid splitting census blocks.
Maybe I'd misunderstood. I thought that was a hard and fast rule. But maybe that's just the way the tool was built, and that's what I misunderstood.
Yep.
Sorry, Ken, we've got a little homework for you here tonight.
Does Dave's tool allow that, the moving of lines that don't respect the census block lines?
I don't know.
You're going to show us Dave's tool, right?
No, I'm not going to show you Dave's tool tonight. What I'm going to show, we're going to send you a link to Dave's tool as well as the instructions about how to use it.
Oh, thank you.
Paul, do you want to go next? I have a couple more comments, but I see your hand up.
Bill, go ahead. I was just going to ask if we're waiting to move to public comment, but I do see we have some members of the public. Are we going to have that public comment period tonight, Jessica?
Yeah, I think we should wait until after we see the maps that are population balanced.
Oh, okay.
Get any public comments at that point to those maps.
Phil, did you want to jump in then?
Yeah, okay, so I have a small one and a big one. Let's do the big one first. Can you go back to the 4 district maps, please? This one will do. So the far left and the far right have this long, thin district. What that does is it connects the Latino community on South Main with an area of high density Hispanic citizen voting age population in that bit to the northwest behind between Kelly and to the west of Highway 1. So I think we should discuss this issue of racial gerrymandering. I think in our earlier meetings, we established that the Latino community in Half Moon Bay was a community of interest. And also I think we heard that the reason Hispanic is used in all the demographics is because it's a language identifier and a cultural identifier rather than a racial grouping. So are these districts, the long thin ones that you see in the long thin green one, for example, on the far left, is that a racial gerrymander, or is it a valid district that keeps a community of interest together?
You asking me?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think when I was looking at these, that district achieved something like 40% Hispanic CVAP, at least in the old numbers. And so that really would keep the potential for this particular community to not have their representation diluted. All the other maps, tend to split up the Hispanic population so that their vote is diluted, i.e. being cracked over more than one district.
All I can tell you is that said, the whole map doesn't work. So, yeah. and in fact, you'll see in the later slides, I know Doug and I had a long conversation about this, the concentration of citizen voting age population in the Latino or Hispanic population is not such that it would be, it would not produce the level that you're talking about for a potential seat. You just, right. The numbers are not there as you'd want them.
The entire reason why the city went to district elections was because it was challenged on exactly this issue.
Correct.
And basically what we're being told is that the entire reason the city knuckled under to not, to go to districts is not meetable, not legal, and not valid. It's a little bit bizarre.
Well, surreal. Ken hasn't gone that far yet. Maybe this long thin district is a valid choice of district.
No, that may be true, but it's. I was told that Joaquin was elected by voters who were 80% non-Hispanic in his district. The people who actually voted in that district. So that kind of belies the assumption, that you have to assemble, a block that votes along those kinds of, lines that are not based on merit alone.
Well, I don't know if we should extrapolate from one election. I mean, there's a reason why the federal law and the California law have been written the way they are. So, I mean, I'm just interested to hear from Ken whether this district is allowable or not.
I'm telling you, the map is not allowable.
Sure.
So I can't tell you if that district is or isn't.
Sure.
But if the other districts and all got balanced and somehow it got trimmed to fit, would that shape, with that content, if it turned out to be 1/4 or 1/5, be acceptable? Is I think what Phil is asking.
No, I know what he's asking, and I appreciate that too from the both of you. I would tell you that you have to somehow, you have population along this ribbon here, right? And so they have to be picked up with not a lot in the middle. You somehow have to find a way to capture all these. Now this map here, the second one, just cuts it off, right? And it says, doesn't bother me that there's nobody in here. But you can see 3 maps in a row are trying to get after that ribbon of population.
And somebody could torture a map even further and try to put the 2 mobile home communities into the same district. I don't know if they can torture the map that much.
And if the characteristics are the same, not race, not ethnicity, but if you could argue that these are a community of interest that lives along this ribbon, you could make that argument, Commissioner Marshall.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting to find out more about, for example, whether there were, whether the congregation of Our Lady of the Pillar, whether they live both to the northwest and also to the southeast of the church. It could be one way of investigating, I guess. Okay, so I think I'm hearing it's not obviously a gerrymander.
Correct.
And Phil, I think the third map that we're looking at here is very similar to the existing map. There's just, you have to include that long piece in there somehow. Are we ready to move forward to the NDC maps?
Yes.
Paul's had his hand up for a long time.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Paul, go ahead.
You're on mute, Commissioner Gator. Nope.
Okay, it seems like Paul's having some sound issues.
Yep.
Why don't we continue on, and then if once you're able to get in there again, Paul, feel free to jump in.
So I have 2 maps for 4 districts. And you can see, again, we've taken the existing maps and the adjustment here, right? We merged 2 centers. It explains it here, right? But this—
Are these on the website as well?
No, not yet.
Thank you.
Because these are not District R maps. Let me check something here. Okay. Puts this block into District 3. Draft A puts the block all in District 3. And in this space here, this one goes back into District 2. These changes would take the existing map and make it population balanced. And as Doug noted down here, Highway 1 is the north and the southern border of here. You can see how close you are to the population target with that percentage there. Let me go to this one. So it puts this back into District 3, this section here, which would have been in 4. Remember, you're trying to take from 4 and I forgot the other one, 4 and 3, I think. No, you're putting into 3, right? But you're trying to take from 4 and 1, I think. And you're trying to move it around so that the population is balanced within, these are geographic areas. And so the idea is presumably this neighborhood, this community here would not be far off that distance, different from to be in District 3. It wouldn't be inappropriate to put them in District 3. And again, you're at 0.1, 1.59, et cetera. You want me to go to the 5 districts?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Five districts, you can see changes a little bit more. Doesn't have the arrows and the lines to tell you what changed, but you can see the existing council districts, right? And that what changes is things shift. You have to cut it up differently, obviously, because it's 5 districts rather than 4. Here you can get a little granular to the cities that you guys all know pretty well. I mean, to the streets that you all know pretty well. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions here.
No, this is great. Great to have these examples. Thank you.
And then there's this one as well. Let me just go back and forth. You can see what happens. There's a significant chunk right in the middle with 3 and 5. And that all switches around. It's 3, 5, and 2 now in the middle there. So you're moving you're moving lines around within a chunk and trying to keep communities of interest. Obviously, this 2 down here captures a lot of its population, but then goes up the coast here. And 4 obviously gets population here. Yes, sorry.
I have a comment for you, Ken, which is that the Alsace-Lorraine district, which was mentioned in the community survey a fair bit, that's the part, see where the green, blue, and pink all meet? That's the middle of Alsace-Lorraine. I think for
here?
No, where the green, blue, and pink meet.
Right there?
Yeah, that's Alsace-Lorraine.
Okay.
That neighborhood, I think, has some in common with Ocean Colony. And so many of the maps have Ocean Colony and Alsace-Lorraine in the same district. And I think that makes some sense. If you look at the bottom, where the districts 3 and 4 meet, right where the cursor is, those few blocks there that are purple, they naturally go with the rest of Arleta Park, which are the green neighborhoods close to the district number 3.
What are you calling this neighborhood here?
Arleta Park. Yeah.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Arleta Park.
Sorry, that's what I thought I heard. I just heard it twice. Arleta Park.
Yeah. So last time, I think there was some confusion in Arleta Park as to why those blocks weren't included in District 3, but were instead a little extra piece on District 4. So I think
Commissioner, instead of a number, Arleta Park here should go with, what would you call this here?
That's also Arleta Park.
Okay, so Arleta Park as a whole needs to be in the same district.
This is, by the way, just to interject, this is, I live just about where the number 4 is on this map. And I literally can see, houses that are in 3 different districts from where I'm sitting right now. And it seems rather odd that my neighborhood is cut up the way it is. Okay. And so it's somewhat of a personal thing for me. It was just an example.
Sorry. So this changes it somewhat, right? Because it comes down a little farther. Is that correct?
Well, there you've got Arleta Park divided into 3 districts.
Because it's here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this one is even worse from that standpoint because
Okay. This is really, really valuable for us to hear.
For the purpose of our Arleta Park conversation, I think you would want to make sure that Central Avenue down to Seymour on the south, and then Railroad on the west side, that block area is considered Arleta Park and should be a contiguous group.
Okay. Seymour and Railroad.
Yeah.
Well, she's basically saying from Central Avenue on the north to Seymour Street on the south.
Correct.
And while Steve lives where the number 4 is, On the north side of Poplar Street and on the west of Railroad, I don't believe there are any houses, are there?
Here.
No, that is the open space. And actually, there are just a few, I want to say 5 houses that are to the west of Railroad and to the south of Poplar, but we're not in a block where we can be assigned to the rest of Arleta Park. That's actually I don't know if that's a census failure or what that is, but it's we're in this sort of weird outlying area. So I don't know that there's a way to rectify that.
Well, we're going to get an answer to the question of whether we can break a census block or not. That might allow us to rectify some of those things. Because I think those things exist around Grandview Terrace and communities like that as well.
Again, this is good. What I'm hearing is whatever map we draw, this area that I'm circling here, particularly central to Seymour Railroad to how far east would you go?
I would say the highways is the split.
To the highway? Okay. If to the extent possible, we're going to try and keep that community together.
Yeah.
Yeah. The question of how far east seems to bear on, when you start to consider it, to be part of downtown if we have to balance populations.
So that's exactly right, Commissioner. This happens a lot, by the way, in rural counties where you've got these massive, pieces of land, and the only place to population balance is to come to the cities. And so you have to put, populations that are more urban with rural, right? It's not the case here with Half Moon Bay, but in this instance, you're right. You have to, there's the old phrase, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. If you need people to balance a district, you have to go to where the people live. It's not the only place that people live in Half Moon Bay. There are other population centers, but we do have to balance, particularly in a downtown area. Do we want to look?
Mind going north and see the rest of the map?
The only thing I have is this for going north for the rest of the map.
Okay. So is that because you haven't finished it, or that's just because that's what you did for tonight?
No, but that's what we did for tonight. The reason he highlighted this is where the most significant adjustments would be. Okay. Beyond that,
committee member settles the maps for Half Moon Bay, even in 2018. They tend to zoom in where the 4 or 5 districts split, because you can see in the other, the icon there, that you can see the line down here where Miramontes and Main Street, and then it's everything else northeast of that of Highway 1.
And Jessica, question for you. My recollection is you requested each of us to submit to you communities of interest, an actual write-up. So that
I think you were all encouraged to participate in the survey and submit a map. And
right. So not asking about the committee members, but for the public, did the public do that? Did they give you write-ups on their communities of interest? So that is part of the record going forward?
Yeah, remember the slides that I shared at the beginning of the meeting, that the 4 different slides that listed out the different communities of interest that people had mentioned?
Right.
We have those, yeah.
Okay. And I'm assuming some of those are more detailed than others?
They were, yes.
Okay.
And there's an area to, the north of this map, when you see the full map on the side there, that you wanted to make a comment about a community of interest in that area, you could let Ken know and he could consider that.
Yeah.
I would like to make a note for Ken that at the top of 5, where you see 137, 110, and 48, those are a small community that runs from 137 all the way up to Oak Avenue, and from General Lane to Highway 1.
Hold on. Which are we looking at? This map or this map? Which one do you want to look at?
Well, this map has them together, and 501 has them split. I just wanted you to be aware that that was, you know, sort of a community of interest. It appears, you know, that's like by neighborhood.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Say it one more time so I get it.
That 502 keeps a neighborhood together, and 501 splits it, and that neighborhood runs from Kelly Avenue at the south, where 137 is.
Okay, hold on.
Through.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so 137 and the one to its right and the one above it, you know, I would say are a community of interest, a neighborhood, along with the ones that are blue just above them.
Right. So you're saying these three chunks belong in District 2?
Yeah, or the chunks above them, but not to their left, belong in. They belong together regardless of
what's the neighborhood that you would call it, or the community?
Do we have a name for the community behind Three Amigos?
I'll just put neighborhood behind.
Aren't those apartments and townhouses there on Kelly?
Yeah, it's a densely populated, you know, area.
Like townhouses and stuff, right?
Yeah. Whereas south of Kelly are separate, you know, larger houses, and then when you get south of Central, you get smaller houses that were built in an earlier period from the ones north of between Central and Kelly.
I believe that neighborhood might be called Oak Park.
Thank you.
Oak Park. Okay. So noted. I have the neighborhood behind Three Amigos, but I have 110, 137, and 48 in District 2, and Oak Park is what I've noted. So again, this is going to help us reshape. So what you're going to get is 501 and 502 A and B, or you'll get variations, just in case you want to use these as two of your examples to take to council that we know are close to, or take the existing districts, at least in the 4, not the 5, right? And get them sort of closer to where they were and balance them. Beyond that, the public ones, right? If you want to make sure that those are population balanced after you push it back out and have it come back in, then we can look at those, try and get them population balanced and see if they come up with a variation so that you can narrow it and then hand it to the city council in a focused way. You can say there are 3 different types, and here's what they look like.
Could you go back to the 4 district maps real quick so we could check with Arleta Park and how those were split?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that.
It looks like Arleta Park has the same issues on these maps as well.
So I have that circled.
So Ken, I have a comment for you on the long extended district in the 4 district maps that connects Oak Park with South Main. So that is the Latino community connecting map.
Yep.
I think the way that the connection worked was through the east side of Arleta Park. So if you just look at Highway 1 there that goes from South Main up towards Oak Park, where there's a high density of the Latino community, I think the district connects through the blocks that are just to the west of Highway 1.
So these connect to this.
Yeah. So the blocks that are just to the west of Highway 1 going north, so that the east side of Arleta Park are the bridge. And the reason is that those also have a somewhat higher Latino density. So is 3rd Avenue a demarcation line? I don't know. You'd have to look at the blocks, but what is there is a gradient in terms of property value and presumably household income. The closer you get to the ocean, the more expensive the property value, as you might expect.
Right.
So I I think we have to be careful there, Phil, as well, because this is a pretty fluid situation. I can tell you from living in this neighborhood that at the drop of a hat, some of these sort of more modest older homes are being bulldozed with, very expensive replacements. Empty lots are selling for, ridiculous multiples of land value. And so I think we're looking at some evolution that is going to upset that to a certain degree, where I think it's been more or less stable for a while. So I think there's a danger in kind of looking at a snapshot right now and assuming that it's going to continue that way. But in a sort of a more broader sense, I just wanted to ask real quickly, Jessica, whether you have just kind of and obviously we need to consult real data for this, but I suspect, Ken, you implied that this kind of exercise is difficult when you come to sort of city centers and more densely populated areas. And in a city the size of Half Moon Bay, we don't really have a densely populated area. We don't have high-rise apartments. We don't have that sort of thing. But this area we keep looking at on the map is the most complicated area because it is it is more or less the center of the city. And I think what we're looking at is a problem that actually is not a problem. It's a feature. It's not a, Hal and some others may understand this. When I say it, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And one of the features of Half Moon Bay is its diversity. And so on a block to block, home to home basis, you're going to find a pretty wide variety of demographic profiles from, all the way from tech executives to, much more modest households that, that span the entire gamut of the demographic rainbow. And so I think we're running into a challenge here where any which way you cut this, you're going to cut an artery in this map in this area. So I just want to say it is a complicated exercise. Yep. From my point, I'm not going to stand on ceremony and say, my goodness, I want to make sure I'm in the same district as my next door neighbors. But it is kind of weird that I don't seem to be able to accomplish that. But yet, I think we have a much broader issue. So I think I just wanted to comment on that for Ken's benefit.
No, I appreciate that. And it sounds familiar with a number of different cities that I've worked with. And in my own here in Pasadena, we have a similar, and it's why we do this, Commissioner, every 10 years, right? Because to your point, things change and people and populations move. What I would suggest too is, look, these district boundaries are not, physical boundaries. And again, it's not the territory. It's, you're talking about what will get you representation so that when you in a certain district have an issue, you have somebody to call who will represent your issue. It doesn't mean that council people don't cooperate and go across and do all sorts of things. We tend to get really, really focused on that. You hit it right on the head though. When you get to places like this, where there's significant challenge or a transition, those are really, really challenging places to draw lines because folks know what's going on in communities and all that. So that's why we're having this conversation here. You want to draw it as best you can so that the representation reflects as best a snapshot as possible.
And just back to the one question I heard you ask, Ken, you asked if 3rd Avenue was some sort of a line, and I would say that it's not. The highway is a more accurate split in that small section of the map that we're looking at. Okay,
so it's the eastern side of Arleta.
Yeah.
Right? And then
3rd Avenue is included. The blocks just between the highway and 3rd Avenue are still included in Arleta.
For your edification, Ken, the town grew up around Main Street and Parissima, and the highway was put through in the 50s and split Arleta Park. So what we talk about as Arleta Park today, generally people think of as west of the highway, but in terms of, people who've lived here for a very long time, they're on both sides of the highway and think of that as Arleta Park.
Yeah. That's what I mentioned earlier is sometimes highways split communities and sometimes they don't. But I can hear it. So the history matters, but we're trying to get the snapshot as best we can today. Are there other?
To Ken's point, we talk a lot about not wanting to split certain communities as to not dilute their voting power, but at the same time, is Arleta Park a large enough community that it would benefit from 2 representatives on the council versus 1? So that's something else to consider when you look at some of these neighborhoods is, you know, are 2 representatives better for the benefit of the community versus keeping it separate with 1 representative?
It's a very good point, Jessica.
Are there any more questions, or are we ready to move on to taking public comment?
Can I just wrap it up with this part here? This is what, you know, we wanted to emphasize. You know, the numbers are the numbers. The CVAP isn't concentrated except for Commissioner Marshall, as you pointed out, the ribbon on the east side. But the numbers here are, you know, it doesn't mean that different groups can't get elected from different spaces, but this is what the numbers, and I don't discount what Commissioner Mahler said about you have a diverse population. It's the way the census is counted. This is what it looks like from the numbers. So I did want to talk to you about that. We will try and get the NDC maps up as soon as possible. And I'll talk to Jessica about Dave's and District R as best we can. So there. Sorry, Madam Chair. Chair Holt, I just wanted to get that in, and now I'll be quiet and get out of the way or continue to take notes or whatever. You want me to stop sharing, perhaps? You're on mute. Chair Holt, you're on mute. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so thank you, Ken. That was really informative, and we've given you some homework tonight, so I appreciate you taking all of this. So yeah, I think we can move to public comment. It looks like we do have some members of the public here tonight. So
I just had one quick clarification, which is, you know, whether we can expect perhaps a weekly, you know, email notification as to what additional information or resources are available for us to consult between meetings. And I also wanted to clarify, I think it was probably a misstatement that people could run in any district regardless of where they lived, because I recall from the earlier redistricting process that at that time I think it was a clear understanding that you could only run in the district where you live. Maybe that could be clarified to us so that we're sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure who mentioned that, Hal, but you can only run for the district that you reside in, and you are elected by district. And at this point, I mean, if there is information to share, we'll certainly share it with you, but the census numbers are final. And I don't believe outside of Dave's that we would be adding any new tools on top of that. But if there is any information to share with the group, I will certainly share it.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public that are wishing to speak tonight, Jessica?
If anyone would like to provide comments that are in the audience, please use the raise your hand feature. I'm not seeing any raised hands, Chair Holt.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like we have
one now. Hold on one second. Jan Hansen. Jan, go ahead. You are muted, Jan. Jan, if you're there, could you unmute yourself?
Yes, sorry. I continue to be a little bothered by the fact that the 4 criteria seem to be kind of inconsistent. Undivided community of interest, for example, where I live, at the south end of Kenyatta Cove, I consider my community of interest to be other seniors. But to tie that with the senior housing up at the south end of Main Street, that's not a contiguous boundary. It's not a compact district. And whatever the 4th one is, I just don't see a consistency there. Geographically, since we're at the very southern tip of Half Moon Bay, our only neighbor is Ocean Colony. They're wonderful people, but the 2 communities, frankly, don't have a whole lot in common. And maybe that's not a bad thing, but I just am kind of bothered by the criteria.
Thank you, Jan. Ken, did you want to comment as to how we might be able to accomplish that, or whether? Yeah,
if you want me to comment, I'm happy to. But you, the criteria are the criteria, but the key here is that the community gets to define its communities of interest. If you wanted to define seniors as a community of interest, you can, but you have to then try and go up and find a way to get a compact, contiguous district. And so that's the challenge. Ms. Hanson, you're exactly right. Sometimes these communities of interest run into each other and weave in and out. The most common mistake people make in this effort is they see the word community and they think geographic. And they don't think widely. They don't think, where do we shop? Where do we play? Where do we do what we do? Or the different socioeconomic groups, which really, really adjusts things. I wish I could change and adjust and write the rules. Those criteria are the way they are, the federal and the state. But it's up to the jurisdictions to define particularly that one, the community of interest. And the way this plays out, again, is if you get challenged, you have to be able to go to a court of law and say, this is how we drew them. This is the logic we used. And it has to hold up. So that's the answer. I wish there were a better one, but that's it.
Thanks for that, Ken. So I think we've had an eventful evening here, and we have updated some timelines in terms of when we're going to look at maps. And so keep in mind the date 11/26, which is now our new deadline for using the new tools that are going to be online soon, and updating our maps to be balanced with the updated population numbers that we have. So we have 3 weeks now to get that done. There'll be some processing time after that. And then our next meeting will be on December 16th, when we'll be able to look at those maps again. This time they'll be a bit more balanced and accurate. So if no one has anything else, Claudia, go ahead.
I would just ask that Jessica send us an email or a text when those tools are ready to use.
Yeah, I'll speak with Ken tomorrow, and we'll get finalized what we're going to do. If we're unable to get District R populated with the correct data prior to the deadline, I would suggest that we just turn it off and ask people to use states maps, or else we're going to run into the same issue again. But once we get all that figured out, and I put together some communication around the new tool and the new deadline and what we're doing, I'll send that out to the group, and then you guys can also share that with your networks and, you know, on your social media, et cetera, and then also use it for your own information. So look for that from me in the next couple of days.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the committee before we adjourn for the evening?
I would just like to thank Jessica and Ken and the NDC folks for what I know has been a lot of zigging and zagging to manage to keep this ship afloat, because this is a very important process, and it's been you know, we're as they used to say in the military, held together with Scotch tape and baling wire right now. But you know, we're pushing forward, and we are. Speaking for myself, I'm very grateful for the work you guys have done, and I hope we can. Push forward again and get this put together here in the next few weeks and see some results.
I second that. Thanks, Ken. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I just say one thing? I am at a disadvantage for not being of the community, and I apologize for not having more intimate knowledge. But it is, even at the places that we do know, it is quite a messy. You call it a zig and zag. It's a messy process, because there's so many little pieces pulling at it. And I appreciate you all have been more than gracious. So we'll turn stuff around and get you the next refinement as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, committee members. Thanks to the city staff and Ken, and to our translators for being here this evening, and members of the public as well, of course. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.